supposedly there's a burn document that was found, I want to say like 6 or 7 years ago, and somebody returned it in to a MUFON group, and it talked about
what is MUFON?
MUFON is the Mutual UFO Network.
Oh, okay.
They were created in the early 90s to kind of be that group that really kind of investigates, hey, what's really going on with no agenda. They had no agenda. It was just really kind of find out what the truth was. So as this group started to mature, obviously, listen, it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And now, like I said, when I've actually submitted some film to these guys on, hey, what am I looking at here? What is this thing? So they're a huge organization now. I mean, a monster organization. And they have now implemented some programs with David Greer, who is Dr. David Greer, who was Stephen Greer. I'm sorry, yep. who was the guy responsible now for kind of bringing this whole thing to the forefront with the 40 people that he brought. One of the guys that was there talked about buildings being on the dark side of the moon. He was in the Navy. He had a top security clearance. He said that when they brought him in, and he was going to be handling video and film that came back from combat missions. And he goes, he got brought into a room one day. He said, the guy said, stay here, wait right here, I'll be right back. And he said, I hadn't even gotten my clearance yet. And he goes, so I'm standing in this dark room where they're developing the film, and the guy says, hey man, you want to see something really cool? Come over here. So he's like, oh, okay. So he goes, I go over there and check it out. And he starts showing me buildings on the dark side of the moon. And he said to me, these aren't ours. So
Aiden, that's your fucking cue, bro.
So when you start looking at that, again, going back and kind of looking at the bigger picture, like what? So this guy can't be lying. I mean, is he? Would he really get up here? Would all 40 of these people have such fantastic stories that you would say, no, this guy's lying? The one guy that talked about 40 different creatures that were coming here, 40 different aliens or 40 different terrestrials, ETs that were coming here. One of the former prime ministers of England said the U.S. has been dealing with a group called the Tall Whites for like the last 15 or 20 years.
Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure this is the conversation that got shadow banned.
So that's probably what it got.
The Tall Whites, the Rockefellers are in control. They don't want us to.
The Tall Whites, they're
Isn't that the one for Men in Black?
No. Explain. These guys don't know about the Tall Whites. We gotta educate these newbies on the Tall Whites.
The Tall Whites were a group of very Nordic-looking extraterrestrials, very tall, light hair, just very, very big. Uh-huh. There was some talk that in the early 30s that there was a guy that was basically, his name was Thor, and he was a Tall White, and he was working within the Senate and Congress. So if you look him up online and you pull him up, this guy looks like a very tall, Nordic, slack-jawed, just a really good-looking human being, or alien, whatever he is.
Like a Viking.
More like a Viking than anything else.
Like something on the Rumpelmans logo.
Yeah.
Very cool. I mean, but again, so this, at the time.
I understand.
What?
Yeah, at the time when this guy from Canada came out, he said that, UFOs were as real as planes that fly over your house. I mean, he said, there's no denying it. They're there. We know they're there, whether the government wants to talk about it. And I think, again, in the bigger picture, that if the planet, let's just say
these are the Tall Whites.
Elon Musk.
There we go. Others talk about it, but that see the blonde next to him. That's really kind of what they say they look like right there. Now I see our boy up there at the top. Yeah, right. Go to that one up there. Nope. Yeah, next one over. Nope. Right there.
Edward Snowden.
Do
you think he's a Tall White?
So, well, I mean, listen, he's living in Russia right now, and I'm sure they're going to let him stay there as long as he can continue to tell them secrets, because once he runs out of secrets, he's coming back to the U.S.
Yeah.
They're going to send his ass back.
I don't know. I don't think he's definitely not going to come back to the U.S. because he's going to go to prison if he does.
Well, I was going to say, it wouldn't be a choice.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a
choice. The Russians will hand him over, go as a, hey, I know you guys want this guy, so here, we're your friends.
I think the Russians are letting him sit there and be safe and be comfy because it's kind of like a fuck you to America.
I definitely go with that. For sure. They, like I say, I think that they think they've got the upper hand with having a guy like him.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've listened to him talk. He's definitely a smart guy. Mm-hmm. Definitely an intel guy for sure.
Yeah.
Is he playing the game? Probably. But somebody somewhere is dealing with, and I think this is how it works out. I think each country has found a UFO. And I think that each country is kind of doing what they do to develop that information as quickly as possible. And I think whoever's running the show is kind of watching that, trying to figure out, okay, who's my best student here? Mm-hmm. Who's really the smartest of all the groups? when you go back and if you look at humanity and how many times we've been wiped off the planet, and you're back on the planet and then wiped off the planet again, and whether this is through natural selection or if it's through the Great Flood or if it's through some sort of virus or disease.
Or meteor.
Whatever it was, would kill everybody off. And then all of a sudden, somehow the Earth would repopulate. And so today, there's more people on the planet today than ever recorded history. Why is that? And I think if you look at one thing that has changed more so than anything, it's the way that we develop and cast out from our cars all the carbon dioxide. The planet likes carbon dioxide. The trees like carbon dioxide. So I think that we became so good at that's really what they wanted. So I think we're kind of like a bacteria. I don't think that, it's the same way as if we see a bug on the ground, we kind of look at it and walk over it. I think they kind of do the same thing with us. And I think they monitor us, though, to obviously see what the health of us is. You want the bacteria to keep doing what it's doing. And I think when you look at kind of the history of mankind, I mean, we live near the water, we overpopulate, we destroy everything. If you look at a good virus or a good, toe fungus, you get, and pretty soon all of a sudden the toe fungus is taking the nail off. And I think that's kind of what happens here. And I think so they start to watch that here recently in Egypt. Now, let me back up. About 40 years ago in the Sinai Desert, they found this green glass. And they couldn't really figure out where the green glass came from, other than the guys who were head of our nuclear program here back in the States knew that when they set these bombs off in Vegas, in Nevada, that they, right near the center of where the blast was, the sand would melt and it would turn green. So they came back and started looking at the rocks and were like, well, I mean, check this out. They found one of the, on King Tut's coffin, they found this green beetle. And they couldn't figure out where this green beetle came from. Where did they get the stone from? And they said it's definitely from,
find the green beetle.
4,000 degrees, what it takes to melt sand. So it's obviously a big event that takes place. The Egyptologists have always said, well, it was a meteor strike. Well, I mean, the ancient alien guys are like, okay, well, where? Where did it hit? Well, the sands can cover up everything. They cover up pyramids. So they kind of had, okay, we'll take a back seat to this. 4 weeks ago, they found a carved picture of what looks like a bomb. I mean, just like the A-bomb. If you remember what the A-bomb looks like, it's a guy dropping it from his hand, and on the left side or on the right side of the picture is this mushroom cloud. So they just found this. So now the Egyptologists are going like, aha, well, it's too peculiar. And I think if you look, I think those pictures are up there too. I think I gave you those pictures.
Yeah.
So they also had spaceships that were on there, or extraterrestrial crafts that looked like your traditional saucer that they outlined as well. So 3 weeks before that, they found these hands. They were steel metal hands. They found 16 pairs that were 3,600 years old.
What other things about our moon are exclusive to us? To our moon?
So, first of all, there's the extremely bizarre ratio that you just mentioned, right? Where this 1/400th size of the sun, 1/400th distance from the sun.
Yep.
And that's what produces these eclipses. Then there's an incredible stability of the orbit of the moon.
Okay.
Then, as we mentioned, these craters don't make any sense, right? These craters don't make any sense. And the basin of them seems like it's revealing a shell of some kind, a spherical shell.
Yep.
Then there's the impact tests, right? The Apollo 12 and Apollo 13, where the moon on a seismograph registered like a hollow object.
Right.
And by the way, there's no moon that's a hollow object. Back before Carl Sagan became such a skeptic, he even commented on this and said that it's terrifying because no natural satellite is hollow. Back then,
we know that no other moons are hollow?
Yes, we know it.
How do we know?
It's just not what moons are. Moons are like, they're like rocky bodies that are trapped by a planet, and they're rocky all the way through.
And do we observe the craters on other moons to see how similar they are to our moon or how different they are than our moon?
Yeah. We have detailed, like, for example, Phobos and Erebus, the moons of Mars. We have detailed images of them. And first of all,
how many moons does Mars have?
It has 2.
2 moons.
Saturn and Jupiter have a bunch.
Right.
And, the other thing about these moons are they're all weird shaped. They look like deformed potatoes, a lot of them. They're not beautiful spherical objects like ours is. But there is another interesting thing, and that's the mass cons. So there are these, the moon has a lower gravity than Earth generally, right? Remember the golf ball thing?
Yep.
So, and the Apollo astronauts, we'll get to them too, the Apollo astronauts, hopping around, in the lower. But there are places on the moon where there's a much stronger gravity. There's Earth-like gravity or stronger than Earth-like gravity. And it's actually a problem for navigation because when they pass satellites over it, they can't fly too low because the craft will be pulled by these gravity wells. There are places on the moon, they call them mass concentrations, where the gravity deviates from the standard on the moon.
Wow.
And guess what? They're all perfectly circular. So one thing I hypothesized in Closer Encounters was that if this thing is a space station, it's possible that they built saucers into the surface of it. A saucer is going to have a 0-point energy drive generating a
flying saucer?
Yeah, a flying saucer.
Okay.
Is going to have a local gravitational field.
Yeah.
And if there's people in the saucer, it's 1G.
Yes.
Which is greater gravity than the rest of the moon. So one possibility is that what these mascons are saucers embedded in the space station underneath the regolith as a potential evacuation protocol. Suppose there's a danger, like if some giant asteroid is coming that might hit the Earth or it might hit the moon, and they need to evacuate this station, right? Well, these saucers could just peel off the surface. So that's one possibility of what these mascons are. Saucers with 0-point energy drives running embedded into the surface of the object.
What do you make of the post-game press conference after the moon landing, where all the astronauts are sitting there? They look like they're on a hostage tape.
This is where I wanted to go next. We mentioned the astronaut, right? So, these guys don't even remember what they did up there. When you ask them, they've done interviews with these astronauts. And when you ask them, so what did you do on such and such a day? They basically rehearse a mission log. We did this, and then we went, no. I mean, how did you feel? Like when you were standing on the edge of that, and then they freeze up. They start to look ill. And so like you're saying in that press conference, right? They don't look like national heroes coming back from having been the first men on the moon.
Like hostages.
They look like they've had the shit scared out of them, or, yeah. So I think that these people saw some terrifying things up there. And that's also what Soviet intelligence thought. In Timothy Good's book, Above Top Secret, British UFO researcher, was close to Admiral Norton, Admiral Lord Hill Norton, British Navy, was one of the people who endorsed his Timothy Good's work. And in his book, Above Top Secret, Timothy Good recounts a meeting between British intelligence and Soviet intelligence back during the Cold War. And the Soviets said, we were listening to the medical channel during Apollo. They had a channel that they would use to report back like medical emergencies, things they didn't want the public to hear. A separate channel from the one that was being broadcast across television. And, unsurprisingly, the KGB had found access to this.
They weren't supposed to have access.
Even our ham radio operators were listening to this in America. Some ham radio operators said that they were able to pick up on this too. So the Soviets said, we heard Armstrong and Apollo 11 say, these babies are huge. They're huge. They're warning us off. They're on the edge of the crater. And there's this whole conversation on the medical channel about how the Apollo 11 astronauts were effectively assaulted and scared off by huge spacecraft on the moon, which were not there to greet them. They got the sense that they were there to say, get the hell out of here.
Both 400 times smaller than the sun and 400 times closer than it, so that when we have these eclipses, they're exactly the same size in the sky from Earth.
That's insane.
It is insane. There's a lot of insanity about the moon. If people are interested, I can recommend a book called Who Built the Moon?
Who Built the Moon?
Who Built the Moon? Wonderful book. And it sort of gets into a lot of the anomalies about the moon. And it's one people don't realize it's like very unique. We've never, ever observed another sort of planet-moon relationship like we have with our moon. And the fact of the matter is life wouldn't exist on this planet without the moon there, without the moon creating intertidal zones. There's There's all sorts of anomalies about the moon itself. It's, it's 25% the size of the Earth, but about, I think, 4 or 5% its mass. So it's vastly lighter and yet stronger at the same time too. There's a really strange dynamic.
Stronger?
It's stronger, yeah. So it's like it should be deforming at a different rate based on its density and the gravitational pull that's exerted on it by the planet. In fact, there's all these gravitational anomalies on the moon. We've detected like different levels of gravity in different places on the moon. But what is interesting about the moon is that because there's no atmosphere, we can see the craters that are on it, right? And some of the craters are massive, like they're like 400 kilometers across.
Right.
But they only ever go to a certain depth. They only ever go, like, I think it's a couple of kilometers deep. Like that, it's like we know the mechanics of like crater dynamics, right?
Yeah.
So we can see this on the Earth and on other planets. When stuff hits and it's bigger, it's going to go deeper. On the moon, everything stops at this one uniform depth, no matter how big the crater is. It's as if it's like this, there's this softer material on top for a couple of kilometers, and then it's some hard shell that it just bounces off, and it just nothing penetrates. I think it's like 2 or 3 kilometers or something. But there's this really interesting study on the crater depths. No matter the size of the crater, it only ever goes in so deep.
Yeah, the thing about the moon is insane. Like it's pretty fucking wild when you start to dig into it. I mean, it gets pretty
really
like tinfoil hat, but
It does, but there's no good explanation for how the moon got there. Like, it's very unique. The mainstream explanation for how the moon got there is very suspect and is admittedly very suspect by the people that even come up with it. Like, they're
Really?
like, this is kind of the way we think it kind of come. Yeah, it's the double big whack theory. I think I was explaining to you.
Yeah.
It's this idea that because the moon is so lightweight and less dense, it's like surface material from planet Earth is what it's formed of, is what they think. So, something splattered into a primordial Earth hard enough, like a protoplanet or something hit us, to take off this huge amount of mass, volume of mass, not specifically mass, but only surface mass, like not because people don't realize, like, Earth is iron. Like we are 40, I think the most abundant element on the planet is iron. It's like 47% iron. Like we are hard rock in space. Like the surface stuff, not so much. There's not as much iron out here, but obviously the moon's not made of iron. So something hits the Earth really hard, takes that much material out into an orbit around the planet, and then eventually it correlates and sort of forms the moon as it is. But that impact into Earth would have left it spinning at a high rate, such that it needed another impact from exactly the right direction and exactly the right speed, hitting the Earth at exactly the right point to slow it down to our current rotational speed and dynamics. So it's what they call the double big whack theory.
double big whack theory.
Yeah, so 2 big whacks into the Earth is how they approximate, billions of years ago, of course, that this somehow happened. And it's not a very strong, like, people are like, the probability is super, super low for that possibility to happen. They don't really know. Most of the people that dig into the moon get to the point where, like, just scratching their head going, we don't really know how it got here. But if you were to design a system to support life, if you were to create an environment to support life, then it's pretty perfect. Like, it doesn't get any more perfect almost. Like, we need the moon. We need the Earth in the specific location it is. We need the tilt of the Earth to give us that seasonality. The moon gives us those intertidal zones with its gravity, and those are the areas on the planet where life first emerged and evolved. It's remarkable how necessary the moon is for life on the planet, and it's almost as if you were designing like a little test kit for life or a habitat for life. You absolutely need the moon there. And this is another analogy on an extension of the whole technology discussion. It's like, as technology evolves, we were talking about space flight and stuff before. Imagine now we go to space, right? We have to use spaceships and small things and lightweight composite materials because we're trying to overcome forces of gravity and nature. But let's assume that sometime in the distant future, we have fundamental control over the forces of nature. Gravity. We can control gravity. We can control the elements, like those fundamental forces of nature. What does a spaceship stops to look like a spaceship at some point, and it might start to look like something like a small planet. Like, if you can control gravity and the forces of nature to the point where you can create whatever you want, if you were to create a spaceship or an environment to go into space with, it might start to look a lot like a small planet or a moon. That's not a moon, or a moon than it would a spaceship. Something that can contain an atmosphere, something that has its own gravity. Like it's like this projection of technology way into the future.
Right.
But that's what it starts to look more organic. It swings back around from like these composite materials to organic materials, and maybe that's what things start to look like. So again, in that vastness of space and that the distance of time across billions of years, who's to say that the moon wasn't like created and flown here and put in place to like support, like, hey, this planet's in the right zone, let's give it the thing that it needs to create life, and we'll squirt some DNA at it, and then, billion years later, here we are.
Nearly 50 years have passed since the first lunar landing of a human. Since then, we have learned a tremendous amount about Earth's nearest neighbor and have never lost interest in it. The South Pole Aitken Basin, which is on the far side of our moon, is one of the largest intact craters in the solar system. Numerous orbiters, including the Chinese lander Chang 4 and other spacecraft, are studying the region, which is the focus of numerous investigations. Now, scientists have found something strange beneath its surface. It's a revelation that confounds scientists even today. What was found growing beneath the surface, and exactly what is happening with the moon that has caused scientists to scramble for answers? Let's find out. A structure that weighs 2.18 quintillion kilos and measures more than 300 kilometers, 186 miles in depth, has been found by planetary scientists. Imagine burying a mass of metal 5 times the size of Hawaii's Big Island underground. Approximately that much unexpected bulk was found. The team speculates that the mass may have come from the asteroid that created the crater. The Gravity Recovery and Interior Laboratory, GRAIL mission of NASA, which monitors minute variations in the moon's gravitational field, made it feasible to make the discovery. The internal structure of our natural satellite can be investigated using these findings. It turns out that the mass they calculated is sufficient to lower the basin's whole bottom by nearly a kilometer, more than half a mile. That's quite the pull, considering the crater has a circumference of about 2,500 kilometers, 1,550 miles. What led to this? The group offers 2 explanations for the subsurface mass. First, it might be the lingering traces of thick oxides that developed during the last moments of cooling when the moon was covered in prehistoric magma oceans. However, the researchers lack a mechanism to accurately explain how such a layer formed specifically beneath the basin. Why, of all locations, would it be there? The team contends that the bulk may have come from an old impactor instead. The space rock that created the moon's massive basin was probably large enough to have split into multiple layers when it initially formed, giving it a solid metallic core and rocky outer layers like many planets do today. The impactor's metallic core was shattered inside the huge bowl-shaped crater that was created on the moon on the tragic day of its encounter. But the initial crater didn't survive, as molten rock partially filled the moon's divot. It still contained the melted remnants of the impactor's core. Understanding the origins of the moon's South Pole Aitken SPA basin is crucial to understanding how the satellite was formed, regardless of what generated the enormous mass on the far side of the moon. This basin is without a doubt incredibly intriguing because it is the greatest impact structure that we are aware of in the solar system. Whatever the case, the better we understand the SPA and how it formed, the more we'll understand the early history of the moon, Earth, and the inner solar system. The project to send people back to the moon is currently ramping up. The next opportunity for NASA to land American astronauts on the planet's surface is in 2024. The moon's enormous metallic mystery may then be revealed to us in greater detail. The new analysis not only discovered the enigmatic blob, but also retraced the inner rim of the basin's edge, showing that scientists had previously overestimated the crater's size. This is a potentially significant discovery as NASA and other space agencies get ready to launch missions to the basin and the adjacent lunar South Pole. The most recent scientists to draw out these boundaries made use of information from the Clementine mission, which had a gap close to the basin's southern boundary. However, the most recent research made use of more extensive data from LRO and GRAIL, which showed that the crater is around 40 miles larger than previously believed. Overall, the research heightens interest in the South Pole Aitken Basin. It's simply so enigmatic. And by better comprehending this structure, scientists hope to comprehend how bodies form throughout our celestial family. Every planet in our solar system was created by small objects colliding and then growing into larger objects. On Earth, plate tectonic's ongoing churn has been progressively eroding the planet's old surface and its record of historic collisions. However, the Moon, which still has a surface that is billions of years old, provides a remarkable record of the cataclysmic events that generated one of the largest known impact basins in our solar system's neighborhood when it was still a baby. According to a recent study, the enigmatic grooves that score the lunar surface may have been made by a tiny planet that collided with the Moon billions of years ago and was at least as big as New Jersey. And according to researchers, this discovery could provide insight into a turbulent period of impact bombardment that formerly affected Earth and the rest of the inner solar system. Researchers looked at the region around Mare Imbrium, which is Latin for the Sea of Showers. The right eye of the man in the Moon is represented by this dark region in the northwest quadrant of the near side of the Moon, which is the side that faces Earth. The largest basin on the near side of the Moon, the Imbrium Basin, contains Mare Imbrium. The 160-kilometer wide, 720-mile basin was thought to have been formed by a massive ancient cosmic impact and then filled with enormous lava lakes before cooling to become dark rock. Grooves and gashes around Mare Imbrium are big enough to be observed with even a tiny telescope from Earth. On the southeast edge of the Imbrium Basin, these features, collectively referred to as the Imbrium sculpture, are concentrated. Numerous components of the Imbrium sculpture extend forth from the basin's center like the spokes of a wheel. The Imbrium Basin and Imbrium sculpture were thought to have been formed by a massive asteroid impact around 3.8 billion years ago. It appears that this asteroid was moving from the northwest to the southeast when it impacted the Moon at an angle rather than straight on, sending debris in a southeast direction. However, previous research found additional grooves in the Imbrium sculpture that did not radiate from the basin's center in addition to the features that did. Instead, it appears that they originated in an area to the northwest of the basin's center. The orientations of grooves and elongated secondary craters on the Moon, together with the positions of the Apollo landing sites, helped researchers predict the trajectories of the material released from the Imbrium impact basin. Instead of forming parallel trends that correspond to the fragments coming from various regions of the Imbrium asteroid rather than ejecta from the Moon, one set does not converge. It was really unclear what these additional grooves were for. Nobody was entirely certain of their origin, but Schultz and his co-author David Crawford from Albuquerque, New Mexico's Sandia National Laboratories think they may have found the answer. Their findings imply that a massive asteroid large enough to qualify as a protoplanet or baby planet produced the Imbrium Basin and Imbrium sculpture. Schultz and Crawford used the vertical gun range at NASA's Ames Research Center in Mountain View, California, to conduct hypervelocity impact experiments to find out more about the event that may have generated the Imbrium. In these trials, a 14-foot, 4.25-meter cannon was used to fire tiny bullets at speeds of up to 11,200 miles per hour, 18,000 kilometers per hour, while impact plates and high-speed cameras captured information on the encounters. The researchers discovered that a high-speed bullet frequently began fragmenting after making contact with a surface during a low-angle collision. The sides and top of the projectile would break off and continue moving quickly along the projectile's original trajectory to scour the surface, while the bottom of the projectile would leave a crater. The grooves from these bits would seem to come from a location that is roughly equivalent to the distance between the projectile's bottom and its top and sides, and is slightly offset from the crater created by the majority of the projectile. The experts hypothesized that pieces of the striking asteroid's top and sides that snapped off as it struck the Moon engraved the mysterious grooves of the Imbrium sculpture. Up to 25% of the asteroid in Imbrium may have separated from the actual crash, and several of the pieces completely fled the Moon. The size of this Imbrium asteroid was estimated by scientists using computer models that examined these grooves. According to earlier calculations, the Imbrium asteroid was only approximately 50 miles, 80 kilometers across. But according to these recent discoveries, the impactor may have actually measured roughly 150 miles, 250 kilometers across, or the equivalent of New Jersey's length. comparison of the impactor's scours from experiments and those from a computer model of an asteroid with a 100-kilometer diameter. Physical mechanisms that affect the projectile's outcome at high speeds were found in lab studies and also apply on a much bigger scale. Actually, that is a low-end estimate. It was possible that it measured up to 300 kilometers, 185 miles. The researchers also discovered that a number of additional basins on the Moon might have been formed by protoplanet impacts that were oblique. For instance, they predicted that asteroids larger than previously thought may have formed the Moscovienza and Orientale basins on the Moon's far side, which are each roughly 62 and 68 miles, 100 and 110 kilometers, across. All in all, the researchers speculate that the asteroid belt may have originally been home to many protoplanets. According to Schultz, the huge basins that we can see on the Moon and in other places are the remnants of extinct giants. The researchers stated that collisions with these protoplanets could account for a significant portion of the impacts that pounded the Moon and the rest of the inner solar system between 4.1 billion and 3.7 billion years ago, known as the Late Heavy Bombardment. After impact, thousands of pieces that were torn off the Imbrium asteroid and other protoplanets would have continued to travel through space and strike further targets. These relics from the past may have made a significant contribution to the impact record we observe on the Moon and other terrestrial planets. The Moon, on the other hand, is getting smaller. In addition, scientists have discovered that as our satellite's crust contracts, it tugs on cliff-like fissures on the surface, causing numerous moonquakes. The scarps, which are thought to be no more than 50 million years old, are dispersed across the surface of the Moon in a massive worldwide network. Scarps may have developed as the Moon's interior cooled and contracted, as suggested by their age and dispersion. However, the scientists questioned if scarps were more actively involved in lunar tectonics. 4 seismometers on the Apollo expedition recorded measurements for the investigation, which examined 28 moonquakes with magnitudes ranging from 2 to 5 on Earth. According to the study, they calculated the epicenters of the earthquakes using new methods and compared those sites to the locations of the scarp in LRO photos. A thrust fault was found to be the source of 8 of the moonquakes because they occurred within 19 miles, 31 kilometers, of the fault. The Moon was in or close to apogee, the point in its orbit that is furthest from Earth. These and other intriguing discoveries highlight the necessity of returning to the Moon. Even though there is still plenty to learn from the Apollo data,